Right, just before we crack on with this episode, just a quick word about our sponsor, KS Civils and Groundworks Limited, based in Leeds. They have over 296 years of combined experience in civil engineering and groundworks. Led by Director Carl Smith, their team is known for honesty, reliability and commitment to the highest safety and quality standards. They're proudly ISO accredited and fully CHAS Elite accredited. No matter the size of your project, KS Civils and Groundworks delivers professional, trustworthy service you can rely on. To learn more, visit kscivilsandgroundworks.co.uk. Now let's dive back into this episode. Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. Tonight I've got the honour of having Claire Lilly from the Forcer Protocol on. Welcome to the podcast, Claire. As we were mentioning earlier, I only found out about you about a year to 18 months ago, really. And I would imagine a lot of people up in Northumberland and where I'm at won't really have heard the Forcer Protocol. So if we could just start off with, if you could just give us a background of what the Forcer Protocol actually is.
So the Forcer Protocol is essentially, as I always say, a policing suicide prevention strategy, but it also works with sort of the first, second, third sector as well. In essence, it's a suicide prevention strategy in terms of it's an extra safety mechanism for those with an armed forces service history. Would you like me to break that?
No, I mean,
it's quite.
That's a very good. There's going to be a long subject on that. All right, we'll start at the beginning. Right.
Yeah.
So you formed this, right? And again, people won't realise why. I mean, obviously I do, but people won't realise why. So if you just want to go into the history of it, why you started the Forcer Protocol.
Why, so Alan, my former husband, my son's father, took his life to suicide. I had serious concerns for his welfare and I called the police. And it became very clear sort of a couple of years later, really, in Alan's inquest, because we lost Alan in 2020 during COVID, during the lockdown. It became really clear that the police weren't sort of veteran trauma informed or trauma informed for those with an armed forces service history, because it doesn't just encompass veterans, it encompasses serving and reservists as well. It became really clear that they didn't understand that unique mental health genre and those unique sort of characteristic traits, really. That was one thing. I kind of sort of skip over the trauma of it, but I mean, it was horrific, obviously. And it was just, it's all a bit of a blur, really, about how it all started. I just kind of leapt into this sort of protective. There was a formula that I had that surely they should be asking the question, B, they should be trained on that unique mental health genre. We needed to speed up the allocation of information to intel that would determine accurate risk assessment and allocation resources, but also it's a mental health genre, one could argue, with more in place than any other genre of mental health, with this whole huge amount of resources to utilise. So I wanted the police to kind of, in essence, do a professional referral into that space once they identified that background as well. But I also wanted to speed up the search. And I think when I was heading into Alan's inquest, I kind of had all the paperwork out on the table, and there was something called the Herbert Protocol, which is it was a piece of paper with a list of questions on that was useful information for the police in search of a missing person. I didn't realise at the time that it was actually for people with Alzheimer's, because George Herbert, who it's named after, is actually a World War veteran. And this particular piece of paper in my bundle was blank. Kind of, I said before, in my naivety, I was like, well, why hasn't that been filled out? Why weren't we given that to fill it out? That's kind of an error in terms of the policing, kind of, But it transpired that it was actually for those with Alzheimer's. So I was like, right, we need something like that for a start. We've created essentially an online version because we have an organisation called Safe and Found Online who wanted to turn the Herbert Protocol paper copy into an online version. But I also didn't want to lose the hard copy version, particularly in our sector, because you've got those that have either got not a great relationship with police, quite paranoid due to their condition, or if you like, or their experiences in life, or have been on classified tours and things like that, and wouldn't want their kind of information. And then also you've got kind of people like partners with partners in the military. They're sort of starting to see the kind of the signs, if you like, of PTSD, complex PTSD, maybe TBIs, and that serving person isn't kind of acknowledging that within themselves just yet, and or they're frightened to seek mental health because they're worried about a medical discharge, and say they're at home kind of off camp, living off camp, and they go missing. The wife or the partner can kind of, when they ring up the police, have it all on one piece in front of them and reel off the number plate and all the key information and detail that would be relevant to that risk assessment and then the allocation of the police resources, right? And within the missing persons kind of sector, you have something called the golden hour principle. And then I started to look at things like statistics for suicide, and the narrative sort of at the time was that the civilian cohort in comparison to, I won't say military cohort because they're separate statistics, but to the veteran cohort weren't any different to that than of the general population, right? But then we had a bit of a game changer in that the ONS statistics of 2021 revealed that we lost 253 veterans to suicide, 17 of which were female, the rest were male, but also those aged between 25 and 44 were 4 times more likely to take their own life. And then you look at statistics like, I don't know if you're familiar with like the Beacon Alert, that formerly all call signs, and they kind of did some studies, and actually the people that sort of get reported to them to launch a beacon were 14 times more likely to lose their own life. So we never really kind of had that data until sort of recent years, and we are kind of collecting that now within policing as well. But it also made sense that the police would be a key crucial component, because at some point they will undoubtedly come into contact with the police, whether that's through their vulnerability or through, I don't know, a scenario. It's kind of gone a bit further than just missing from home, hostage negotiation crisis, a domestic playing out at home, attending kind of a bar fight or whatever. That there's the potential there to really de-escalate a scenario through having that understanding. And also what we're trying to do is a lot of military personnel, when they kind of transition out, go into policing. So we're trying to kind of work with a lot of police officers that got that history. So you straight away got that empathy and rapport if you kind of allocate veterans themselves that are police officers out to the scenario that's playing out. So after Alan's inquest, the coroner basically agreed in the narrative conclusion that work could be done. I presented sort of that formula, if you like, step 1, 2, 3 and 4, and the referral phase, if you like. I then set about finding a police force. In the interim, I actually spoke with my local MP, who was the former Defence Minister at the 20 odd years ago, 10 years ago maybe actually. And then I saw Johnny Mercer, who was the minister at the time there. I contacted the National Police Chiefs Council. I needed to prove the concept and the viability by doing a pilot. So I got my pilot force, which was Greater Manchester Police. And then 6 months later, even within that time frame, we safely located, because we weren't asking the question before, so we didn't know the demand. Even in that time frame there was over 100 people reported missing that fitted in with that kind of, those characteristic traits, So, and then 6 months later, I went national, hosted by the Household Cavalry Mounted Regiment in the mess there. And so my background is I was I worked in the equestrian sector with horses, so I also kind of have a military background as well, in terms that I worked for the military for 16 years, and then obviously I was married to Alan and was a wife and a mum in that environment as well. So I had kind of and a colleague, so I had all these different sort of stances. I knew military life very well, right, and gained a kind of a unique insight, if you like, into that psychological mindset and what, you know. So we launched the National there. And then we were back in Parliament last year, which was 2 years in. And during that time, we were in just under 50% of police forces. We were over several hundred veterans or those of us armed forces service history safely located. I'm now about to launch Met, which is a beast of a machine.
Yeah.
Kind of sounds like one police force, but in essence, it's like 12 police forces in one. We're going to do a gradual kind of phase through that. We're going to start in sort of 3-4 of the BCUs that they call them, and I've also got Merseyside and Durham coming on this month. And yeah, this is essentially Alan's legacy, and for me it's been a very kind of cathartic process in terms of formulating that grief and feeling like Alan's life actually and his passing means something.
Yeah.
It'd be a bit of a weird concept to grasp, because obviously I wouldn't, you know.
You wouldn't be here without what happened.
But I can't, you know, let's face it, you know, nothing's bringing him back, right? So what do we do with it? So, yeah, it's been difficult, I'm not going to lie. But it's also been very rewarding. Very, very rewarding, yeah.
One thing I'd like to ask you is, and this might be, you've probably been asked it so many times, but when Alan was, let's call it ill, right? What were the warning signs that you've seen?
Anger regulation, emotional dysregulation, drug and alcohol addiction, sexual promiscuity was another big one. They're kind of the things that are left out, like the gambling. Not that Alan was a gambler, but, you know, sexual, you know, risk-taking behaviours.
I mean, that's all part of the suicide ideation, isn't it? So it's like
symptoms of complex PTSD, and the drugs and alcohol, he's just in essence self-medicating.
Yeah.
Or attempting to, and that's not just unique to veterans, right? But, you know, yeah.
No, it's not. It's not unique to veterans. I mean, it's just one of the things I read about. Last year I did the suicide and self-harm course, and one of the things I was quite shocked at was, you know, the statistics that you read are old. You know, they're not released or worked out every year like for other stuff. And one of the things I did find was it's hard to identify the number of veterans who've taken their own life because the coroner sometimes only records the previous or their last job that they did. So you could have a guy who was a bricklayer, you know, who's gone through it and took that step and gets identified as a bricklayer, and nobody mentions that he was a veteran, you know, type of thing. So things like that get lost. So to me, the numbers are probably slightly higher than's been done.
Potentially. I mean, so if you think Alan actually passed away in 2020, but his inquest wasn't until 2022, right? So
yeah.
Did he sit in the 2020 statistics, or did he sit in the 2022 statistics, right? So, and sometimes it can take a while for, you know, all of that is far too far down the line for me, right? Even being with the police officer is too far down the line. The whole point is you've got this. Yeah. I'm not saying, you know, I know loads of people that have joined the military, had a wonderful career, and it's been the making of them, you know, come from a really kind of broken, dysfunctional background and gone on to do amazing things, right? But there are, with the statistics that we're talking about, like, you know, 4.85 a week, according to the ONS, clearly we have a vulnerable cohort present. You've got 14,000 people leaving the military every year. You've got this huge amount of resources to utilise effectively, you know, that could, you know, and it was always clear as well in Alan's inquest, there were several, if not tens of missed opportunities. And I never kind of went in with like a blame or a claim mentality. Yeah. It's like, right, how do we break this down and how do we create change, right? So it made sense to implement those sort of 4 things. And I mean, it's kind of gone beyond that now, because now for me it's starting to involve things like British Transport Police, the RMPs, social services, ambulance drivers, coast guards and waterways agencies, employers. I'm hitting every kind of area that will potentially have that kind of those behaviours playing out. And and the beauty of the form is as well, I've put the consent option on there because Alan wasn't in a place to do his own personal admin, let alone fill out yet another form. So someone from a breakfast club or a drop-in centre or an Op Courage caseworker or British Legion, or yourself if you've got a friend that's and the potential of like a suicide, as we spoke about earlier, and how that affected you as a friend, as a colleague, let alone a family member, right? It's got the potential to affect that, that passing of suicide, 15, 20, 30 people. And if you don't want to talk about human lives, let's talk about cost as well. A suicide costs £1.7 million. Allocation of resources can cost anywhere for a medium risk and a high risk between £2,000 and £20,000. I mean, I've worked out since the implementation of the Forcer Protocol, all services, MOD, OVA, chairs, foreigners, so far I've saved the whole system £300+ million.
Oh, Jesus.
And I've done it all on not a penny. This is all pure passion. I mean, I should be paid within my role because I work 24/7. But and I am sort of starting to look at that. But I mean, I've had to sort of, create the CIC and essentially learn how to run it like a business. But to me, it was never a business. Yeah. And I sort of sat in on seminars about branding and networking and upscaling it. It was out the gate. People were gravitating and taking it and like, we want it. How can I? It's a beautiful thing. It's not a concept that I need to pitch. It works. So, and I could do with a proper team of people around me. I mean, I'm not going to lie, but I have got in each force, I have got amazing officers. I mean, for instance, one of our officers, he's out, most weekends at like either recruitment fairs or Aldershot or Catterick and capturing those transitioning out of the military. Medical dishonourable discharge, they would be a classic kind of like in terms of vulnerabilities to capture. And so I'm working with kind of welfare officers and things like that about, but at the same time, you don't want, joining the military is not all doom and gloom, but
no, it's not.
But it's getting that narrative right, isn't it, about all of it, so that everyone could potentially be. We're certainly getting the numbers down.
I mean, the way I'd look at that, and you probably already have done, is like the career transition partnership. Is to go through that. I mean, to be fair, it's pretty useless. But as to go through that, they could be given the Forcer protocol there, and I wouldn't say forced to fill the details in. I mean, about the app that we're looking at, and one of the ideas we had there was that this should be mentioned, and stuff like that should be mentioned when they're in training. If you had an app or something like that, then right, you're in training, blah blah blah. Right, install this app. Right, you'll never use it, but one day you might want it. But put it on your phone and just remember it's there.
Potentially, and there are apps out there, various military apps that they kind of all use in. I think it's Reed, isn't it, secured sort of a 10-year contract for career transition out, and they are kind of tapping in sort of 6 months before they leave. And every force that kind of comes on, police force, you've got caseworkers up and down the country, and they can key into their internal computer, if you like, what resources they've got accessible to them in that area, and the Forcer protocol sits on that. It's sort of sitting in. So each police force that kind of comes on, they do an internal launch, an external launch, 9 times out of 10 we kind of create an event, so they local to that police force, they then kind of make that connectivity with their SAFA, the British Legion, their benevolent regional worker, that their op courage, their op fortitude, their op restore, they're all in the room connecting to that police force, bit like kind of what's happening with Valor with the hubs, but that's kind of happening with the police forces. And that's kind of a project that I've been working on for quite some time, is building that sort of network around that police force. Yeah, there's a lot of passionate people behind this project. And I mean,
have you ever found, like, when you've approached some of the police forces, that they've been a bit standoffish?
One comment was, we don't have the demand. I was like, well, if you don't ask the question, how do you know that? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, like,
you don't have the demand, but don't have
any names, but like, yeah. And for me, more importantly, it's the referral care pathway. It's the professional referral into, you know, I don't care whether they use, well, I do care if they use the force or not, but if you're not going to use it, at least be asking the question and know about the referral care pathway, right?
I would think that, or I would have thought that they'd all be jumping on it, you know, straight away.
They're all lined up at some point throughout the year. They're in negotiations, or some of them have had like kinds of system change and hierarchical changes, and they've had to wait for that. Generally, for most impact as well, you go like Armed Forces Week, you know, VE Day, remembering that's kind of when I get my big sort of hits. And it's in terms of promotion of the, you know, advertisement of its existence. But I mean, if I had my way, if I had the team, the money, the funding, it'd be done. I mean, I've just got sign off across Scotland to go across the devolved nations, and they're working really, really hard on like an advanced model in terms of a tartan bow. They're love. And a Met is going to be a slightly more advanced model as well. But
I'd say that the Met's a bit of a beast.
Learning, lots of learning kinds of. But Rome wasn't built in a day.
No, it wasn't. I mean, it sounds. I mean, you just mentioned earlier, you know, you're almost doing this on. Well, you're doing this on your own. You know, you'd love a team and stuff like that. There must have been points through this where you've just gone, I don't know if I can do this or not.
Oh, loads of moments like that.
And what gets you through that?
What gets me through that? I think it's just a process. And I think like grief isn't linear, right? Grief isn't linear. It's tested me in ways that I kind of curse Alan sometimes. I'm like, you're in, you know, I've said it before, he's in big trouble when I see him next, you know. But things like, I mean, I was a horsey girl, I was a horse trainer, you know, country lifestyle, quite a bit of a hippie. They're guest speaking, doing podcasts, live TV. Thanks, Alan. You know, audiences like 100 odd or online 90 odd, you know. I'm like, Alan, seriously, like, but at the same time, and I think I mentioned this in another podcast recently, it's like, I was like, well done, Claire, you did all right there, you know, like, you know, when you push yourself through those comfortable. I've seen a growth, and in Josh and Josh's family and Alan's family, should I say, they're all very proud. It's very sad, bittersweet symphony and all of that, you know, but it's also a beautiful thing. So I'm there, I try and hold on to those, the positives. I kind of, I can't stay in that sort of, sounds horrible to say it, but like that victim mindset too long, because it's quite disabling.
Yeah.
Debilitating.
And a lot of people suffer that as well, you know, survivor's guilt, if you want, you know, that's all part of the, you know, that's all a part of surviving suicide. And the way I say that, because if somebody does take their own life and you're left behind, you're the one who's surviving the suicide.
And it's not necessarily a true narrative to be telling ourselves. You know, it's like in inquest, not any one of those several people or entities were directly to blame, right? But I think that's what it is about the force of protocol, is they can take it and go, right, this is something proactive that we can do as a protective mechanism. Once you've exhausted like pretty much every option, what more can you do? You know, and to tell yourself otherwise is a false narrative, is a false belief system, a false dialogue internally, you know. But yeah, sometimes we should be a bit kinder, and we should be a little bit more patient, and we should be a little bit more helpful, and we should be a little bit more this and a little bit more that. But we're human, you know, as well, you know, and we do get wrapped up in our own stuff.
I mean, one thing that annoys me is when people turn around and say, well, you know, if they're going to commit suicide, there's nothing you can do to stop them. That's not really. You know, I do believe that everyone. God, that's quite a big ask, really. When you're saying, I think everyone can be saved or everyone can be helped, but like you say, through your work, we can try and get the help to them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we've necessarily got a mental health crisis. I think we've got an emotional health crisis, is what I think. Yeah. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, understand. I mean, when I've been really, really down, I mean, I can talk until I'm blue in the face, but it doesn't. If anything, I feel worse afterwards. I'm not saying don't talk, but it's like I love sort of utilising kind of creative channels, whether that's gardening, not me personally, but fishing for some people, a creative outlet, singing, music, dance, whatever that is, painting, photography. I'm so into using those as like a form of therapy, walking and talking, you know, those kind of having those, you know, all the things that sort of social prescribers kind of are trying to prescribe into the mental health sort of sector, and utilizing those conduits to kind of shift that mood, because that state of mind, it is temporary, but it is dark, it is painful, and I can see why someone would want to, or at least consider taking their own life, because they want an end to that pain, right?
Yeah.
And then it's such a, how do you articulate that? The human language doesn't, you know, if you're not the most articulate soul, how do you explain that? I feel sad, I feel angry, I feel, doesn't quite cut it. Do you see what I mean? The gravity of it.
It's also feeling safe enough with somebody to talk about it. So, you know,
like talk about it to someone else, or, you know, and gossip about you, or because there is an element of paranoia, and, you know, that kind of comes with it as well. It's a private conversation, isn't it? You know,
one thing that I've started to, it's in my head. I don't know if I've started to realise it or not, but I think people are getting fed up of the words mental health, you know, because everywhere you look, so it's becoming a bit of a byword or a buzzword, and there is a lot of people who are trying to jump on the bandwagon, if you know what I mean, and like, oh yeah, I'm an advocate of this, I'm doing this
and monetize it, making big money out of it.
That's fucking hell, thank you. That's what I was looking at. I was trying to think in my head what to say. People are monetizing it for themselves, which it should never ever be done. It should never be trivialized. It
needs dollar, obviously. You know, and people should be paid within various roles, and people shouldn't be doing endless amounts of charity work. You know, they shouldn't be doing endless amounts of charity work in that respect. Those kind of things should naturally be funded and allocated resources. But yeah, people are kind of, it's quite sexy, isn't it? It's like the whole kind of you know, yoga and breath work, and I love all of that, but big money, 50 odd quid for a session here, and you know, or if you want the, you know, the best supplements, you know, good gut health and all of that kind of things, loads of money to buy that kind of stuff, you know. And money can be a wonderful thing, but it can also be a very debilitating, restricting thing. And going back to the suicide, one of the leading causes of like that mental health decline is money worries, particularly for men, because they're the hunter-gatherer, the provider, in terms of the primordial brain,
One of the things I found a bit shocking when I was doing my course was like moving away from veterans and just that the wider, I mean, you've said it in previous ones, cohorts of people, like the amount of labourers, farmers, and stuff like that and normally because of like money worries, who take their own lives in men. And the one that really shocked me was the women, and it's primary school teachers. And I was just like, what? It's not just us who've got problems. Everybody has. Do you envisage the Force Protocol moving beyond just veterans at the moment?
Well, it encompasses, so I don't tend to use the word veteran for a number of reasons. So obviously it encompasses, within the figures of those sort of safely located and referred are reservists and serving as well in those numbers. The reason why, and I do talk about this a lot in my talks, is the terminology veteran. So you've got like a subcategories within a category, if you like, there. So the younger generation of veterans don't necessarily identify with being a veteran. Female veterans don't necessarily identify with being a veteran. And you've got, and I've said to like the police officers when I kind of do their introduction and stuff, like, what is a veteran? What are you looking for? It's not just your typical older guy, older female. Are they female? Are they young? Are they like 25? Are they 20? And knowing that unique kind of, so when I do Met, I've got a couple of guest speakers, and one of which is Stacey Denyer. She's amazing, former military, Invictus Games, LGBT community, and you've got kind of the reparations, and then you've got like within the female cohort sometimes there's kind of like sexual abuse and stuff that's gone on in the military in previous years, and how that's impacted their mental health. And it's like educating the police officers of what psychological backgrounds that veteran or those with armed forces service history, and trying to just switch up the language around it really, and the reasons why, and just make them aware of that, and people in general. It's not Iraq and Afghanistan was quite a while back now, right? There's going to be kinds of 19, 20-year-olds that don't even have a connection necessarily to the military or war-related trauma, if you like, and things like that.
I work with some, I'd say quite young, like 25-year-old, but they haven't got a clue about stuff that we've seen or gone through and stuff like that. And
they're really aware of it because of Iraq and Afghanistan and how televised, how much that was in the newspaper. But like Alan's tour in Kosovo and what was happening over in Balklands, and and the other bits and pieces that were going on, horrific, but it wasn't kind of emphasized as much as what it is now with the World Wide Web and the newspaper articles and the coverage that Iraq and Afghanistan, not discrediting that in any way, shape or form.
Not at all. For me, and I've mentioned this lots of times on this podcast, so it annoys me that basically Bosnia and Kosovo and stuff like that's just been forgotten about. When I mentioned Bosnia to and I call them the kids, they're 25, at work, they were like, don't know what you're on about. What happened? And I was like, well, all right. Do you know World War II? Yeah, but you don't know about Korea, Malaya, anything like that. These people are still knocking about. If anything did affect me, well, it did, but for me, it was Bosnia that did it. And sometimes it's, that plays on my mind.
It's bloody horrific.
But it really grips my shit that it's just forgot about. And if we allow that to be forgotten about? How can people treat us or look at us in a different way? You know, your protocol is obviously pushing, you know, the information out to the police to say this is what we could have gone through. But if they don't appreciate, you know, in another 10 years' time, right, so that the guys who were the coppers and that won't appreciate what them guys have gone through. And like you just said, then, you know, Afghan and Iraq was a while, you know, it's getting on. It was a while back now. But from what I understand, a lot of PTSD can form later on, you know, 7 to 10 years after coming out of the military, or
Yeah,
coming away from that
there's a
situation.
lot of research, sort of combat stress have kind of produced sort of some really, really interesting data, and it hasn't got a time frame.
No.
You know, that level of repressed grief and trauma, if you like. Then you've also got the narrative of ACEs, like adverse childhood experiences and all of those kind of stuff. And I mean, I was finding sort of in the inquests, when you map it across, there was this, and I didn't necessarily agree with it, there was this tendency to blame the childhood. And the parents are sitting there,
Yeah.
you know, and it's like, so they're going to walk away. You're actually, with that narrative, you're actually traumatizing them and placing that guilt on their, you know, you weren't given a book on how to raise children, right? You know, okay, draw the line at beatings and, you know, abuse and stuff like that. But yeah, to blame it directly on that, but yeah.
Yeah, I've spoken to guys who have been diagnosed with PTSD and complex PTSD, and I know a few of them didn't want the label of complex PTSD. They really didn't, because it implied that something else had happened.
Yeah, other people do, like they've got, there's different variations, like post-traumatic injury, and you know, and yeah, and it is surmountable. And that's kind of like the message that I'm trying to, I mean, you've got things like, is it the Golden Gate Bridge, of people that have attempted sort of suicide off of there but survived. And they're glad actually that they survived. But in that moment, they wanted it to end, right? Because they've come through it and come out the other side and have a beautiful, because it is only ever a temporary state. But that's why it's so dangerous, and that's why it's so important to intercept in any which way we can, whether that is a phone call or a conversation or a walk or a day out or a police officer turning up at a scenario, or an employer kind of being aware and mindful of and not laying it on thick on that particular, you know, and being aware of dates as well, like anniversaries of, you know, the withdrawal from Iraq, Afghanistan, that kind of stuff, Remembrance Week. I mean, we noticed a spike in our numbers. I mean, I remember like the guys in GMP sort of saying to me, we've had a massive spike like this week. And I was like, it's Remembrance Week.
Yeah.
You know?
And they didn't get that to start with.
Not initially, no. Oh,
no.
Right. But but it's making people, you know, every day's a school day, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think people struggle, general public, just general people, and, you know, people struggle with, because they've never had that mindset, or they've never felt that way, that you can't grasp the pain, the anguish that somebody is in, who's having this idea and thinking, you know, that's the only way out now. I need to stop the pain. I need, you know,
all the words to articulate what that is.
Yeah.
And a lot of them feel like they're alone with it, like it's unique to them, but it's not. It's like, I've heard it 1,000 times over. Like Alan's story clearly isn't unique, right?
Yeah.
And all those emotions and feelings that you're feeling on, you know, when you felt those, that's not unique to you. There's not something wrong with you. Yeah. It's
no, I mean, it's. Oh, how can I put this right? For me, when I had them thoughts, it was basically I was going through the stages of grief, I think it was. Mine was caused by a few things, not just military service, but other
It
things.
never really is. It's a multiple.
Yeah. But I was lucky enough to kind of put myself off every time. Now I've said it on the podcast before, and even now I find it funny. Whether you can find them thoughts funny or not.
Dialogue. Do you mean like your internal dialogue?
Yeah, internal dialogue. So my idea was I was going to drive into a bridge, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and that's what I was going to do. And then as soon as that thought popped into my head, another thought popped in and went, "Don't be stupid. You've got a decent car. You'll break it. You'll survive, and it'll fucking hurt. And then your insurance will go up, and you're going to be screwed." And I was just like, "Yeah, all right." So your brain's there in one way trying to protect you, and in another way you're getting the intrusive thoughts, and you've got like that the deep thoughts in your head that are trying to make you do something else.
Yeah.
But you've got
negative internal dialogue, that narrative. And in a way, like going back to the whole childhood thing, how the brain develops and how we're treated between the ages of 1 and 5, by masculine and feminine figures in our lives, in terms of like there's obviously a healthy amount of discipline, there's a healthy amount of self-soothing, but there's also too far left and there's too far right? So it's like getting that sort of perfect balance. Don't pander to that child's every need and cushion every fall. But if you've had a horrific childhood, you are starting off on quite a dodgy baseline, right? And going back to sort of the suicidal ideation, that's like with the Forcer protocol, a lot of people have a plan of how and where they would do it, and as a result of that information being submitted, we've intercepted at point of suicide in said area with said method, and that key insight into that psychological. I mean, I've known people to get there. There's lots of telltale signs. One that I missed, or we missed with Alan, was the Christmas before. He had a really, really beautiful Tag Heuer watch, and he'd said to Josh, giving away things of value, of emotional connectivity, "Look after it, mate. Don't ever sell it." And I kind of knew, and that was kind of one of my reasons in terms of the sense of urgency for Alan, is because I knew that he'd been battling suicidal ideation for 19 years. I mean, he said to me, like when we met in Knightsbridge, he said, like, the first time I saw you, I thought, well, she looks nice, but he said, I looked behind you at the bars on the stable and thought, that's a nice place to hang myself. And that back then, so I knew that he was. And I suppose it is a good thing to sort of, that's why they say, in kind of the suicide sort of coaching and counselling sessions, to ask that question specifically: have you had any suicidal ideations? What does that look for you? How far have you thought about it? And that kind of thing, because then you can kind of gauge your.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I got straight in without courage because I was asked that question, and
You're right.
I answered it truthfully. A lot of times, a lot of people will, "I'm all right," they won't answer that question, even though they've gone through it. And I've spoken to lots of people, through the podcast. People have called me up and stuff like that to sometimes just to talk. Sometimes that's all it needs, with some people. And if that's, my
A good cry sometimes, that relief of like tears.
Yeah.
I think it's probably
I have had guys, ring us up and talk, and all they needed was, 4 hours on the phone or 2 hours on the phone or forever how long it takes, and years ago I wouldn't have answered the phone. I just wouldn't have. Someone would ring us up. I don't want to talk to anyone, because that's what my problem was. I was starting to go inside myself almost, you know what I mean? And it's doing this.
A bit of a pain in the arse though, right? Yeah.
I won't lie. You know, I can sit here and sound all holier than now and go, oh, look at me. You know, but fuck me, yes, it can be. You know, you're just like, I want to go to bed. Yeah. But it's, you know, I think we're here to help each other, really, sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's all good when it's good, if you know what I mean.
And it is about encouraging that person as well to implement the various tools in there, because you can talk about it till the cows come home, right? But, and I've said before, unless there's that internal change, that internal acknowledgement that you're drinking too much, it's changing your chemical structure. It's a known kind of depressant. You're known to lose your inhibitions and have more risk-taking behaviours under the influence of it. So therefore, you know, there has to be that level of it's an inside job to a degree with a support network around you. It's about all of those things, you know. Yeah. I mean, I'm massively into things like gut health and pre and probiotics and the different types of foods and supplements that we give ourselves, because like serotonin is actually, you know, a large amount of it's made in the gut, and understanding your body and on a scientific level as well about your nervous system and your parasympathetic and your sympathetic nervous system, and a dysregulation of a nervous system, and what coping mechanisms you can do, like a little bit of box breathing in the car, or you know, some kind of practice that helps you regulate magnesium in your bath, nice essential oils in the home. Those kind of things can all affect, and it sounds like hippie woo-woo stuff.
I'm an old guy from Northumberland. It sounds all hippie stuff to me.
It's not, but that's like, that is a human organic requirement. We need those, you know, things in our life. We're not designed to live in the structures that we're asked to live in. We are designed to sort of be out in nature, in park,
running wild, yeah,
food, and you know.
Yeah. I didn't mean to sound dismissive there. It's just, you know, you get. I'm old and I'm like in my roots, you know, stuck in my roots type of thing. You know, I say I'm old. I'm 50. I'm old. I'm 57. You get stuck in your own life type of thing. So even talking about like holistic therapies, let's say, and stuff like that, it's like, really?
It's not even holistic, right? The whole organic thing, it sounds like a new fad, but it was always bloody organic in the first place, you know, wasn't it? You know, it was organic, and you got.
I don't know what's not organic. You know, it's still growing in the ground. It's, you know, that cow's over there. He's pretty organic. He's not made of plastic or all like that. You know.
Now he's hormones and fabulous.
What are your plans for the future for you? Not for the Forza Protocol, but for you. Because you've given so much over the last few years. So it for yourself. Does that make sense?
I did quite a bit for myself.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, it's taken a little while to get to that point of having that balance. So in that first year I was at it, and I was like, oh, that's not necessarily a good idea. Oh no, next November or next June to pace this one a little bit. You know, I won't overbook there and have burnout the other side. So there's like an element of like self-management that kind of kicks in there. I don't really know. I'd like to travel a little bit more.
You said they're managing it. How do you do that? And I'm keenly interested.
It's a repeated discipline. You have to do it.
Yeah. You have to be able to say.
You have to be committed to yourself.
Well, you've got to be able to say no to people as well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance. Yeah. You know, but you do need to know your value and your worth.
Your self-worth, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So before we leave on here, what advice would you give to anyone who's been listening to this? One, who's a veteran.
Yeah.
Two, 2 who's a family member
Yeah.
who is a bit worried about should they do something, should they say something?
Go to forceprotocol.org for a start. Look at the 2 forms, the online version, the hard copy form. Go in the support section, because I've kind of paid quite a little bit of attention to detail in terms of additional support. You might see that you need something in this area, that area, or all of them. Tap into those resources, learn about those resources, you know, get involved in your community. Probably, but yeah, no, just check it out, consider it. And if you do know anyone that's struggling or whatever, just talk about it, get it out there.
A hard thing that might be, say, for a family member is to approach somebody.
Difficult conversation to have sometimes for some people.
Yeah, I think that would be. I don't know. It's one of them things, isn't it? It's like you can't really
mitigate everything.
I suppose mitigate. You can't give the advice either until you've actually gone through something like that, I suppose.
But I mean, I did a delivery the other day for DWP, and they had various sort of key stakeholders, whether that was a work coach at the job centre or an armed forces champion within the housing department. You know, they all kind of come across someone that's got potentially that background and someone they could apply it to or give it to. And I mean, you know, yeah, just spreads awareness of its existence is what I'd say. And if you are really, really worried about someone and they're in your company and they let's have a look at this together. I can fill it out for you if you want, because there's a consent option there, right? Just get them on the system, or at least have that bit of paper, a hard copy. Yeah, we're doing some bits with kind of like prisoners leaving prison, you know.
That's up and over, is it?
They work with veterans in the justice system, yeah. But yeah, no, I mean in terms of having that safety measure implemented in terms of the FORSA protocol. And if they have got, like, you know, or give them the hard copy and give that to someone that you trust, you know. Fill that out with them, or fill it out yourself and give it to someone that you trust.
Right, and on that note, Claire, I'd like to thank you for coming on and explaining about the FORSA protocol, and I wish you all the best with it. I really do. I hope I'm never involved in it, if you know what I mean.
You're right. You're doing your bit today.
Well, yeah, and hopefully the thing we talked about before, you know, something might come about that as well. So again, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, it's a simple concept. It's just literally just Google it, go to the website, download the hard copy form, or fill out or chat about it. It's so, I wanted it simple. It doesn't have to be complicated. It's so simple. It's just very simple.
It really is. I had a look at today, and it is just a case of it's there, you know.
Mentally
just
taxed.
do it.
We need to be mentally taxed any more than we already are.
Right, I'm going to end the recording there. So again, thank you for coming on. Really enjoyed it, and it's been really informative as well.
Oh, bless you. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that podcast. I enjoyed recording it. If you could just hit the like button, and also if you could subscribe and hit the notification bell, that would be great, because it will help the channel grow. The more people will see it, the bigger it'll get, and the more guests I can get on, and the more people I can talk to. Well, I hope you enjoyed it, like I said. Look forward to the next one. Hopefully we'll be out next week as normal. Bye-bye now.